Well, welcome all of you to those who have just joined us. My name is Mike Poyman. I'm the president of the Natick Historical Society. We were established in 1870, and today we remain an independent, non-for-profit organization that receives no public funds. So we depend on the support of our community to help us keep our operations going and to support programs like this, among the many other initiatives we have going. So I extend my thanks to all of you, among you who have been supporters in the past, or I hope will consider being a supporter in the future. So we're thrilled to have Trish Wesley Umbrell with us for this evening's talk about the Natick Community Organic Farm. And before I introduce her specifically, let me say that this program is part of our series called Meet Our Neighbors, which shines a light on local organizations that have shaped Natick in the past, present, and future. It's the second program of our fall term. The next up will be on November 17th, and we'll hear from Dan Shea of the Natick Community of the Natick Service Council. That event will be held on Zoom as well. You can register on our website at natickhistoricalsociety.org. I also want to highlight two other upcoming events, both in December. One on the 1st, in which we'll have Carol Bartlett of the Morse Institute Library join us for an orientation for their new research database, which includes a wide array of Natick newspapers dating back to the 1850s. And on December 12th, we'll have a musician, Diane Taras, performing traditional Victorian Christmas carols. And you can register for both those events on our website. Again, that's natickhistoricalsociety.org. Finally, just a few housekeeping notes. Trish will talk for 25 to 30 minutes, and then we'll have some time for conversation and wrap up about at 8 o'clock as advertised. So with that, let's begin. I'm delighted to introduce Trish Wesley Umbrell. Trish is an award-winning author, director, lecturer, photographer from Natick, Massachusetts. She grew up working at the Natick Community Organic Farm, which is a nonprofit, as you know, certified organic farm, providing productive open space, farm products, and hands-on education for people of all ages year-round, which instilled in her a deep love of plants, farming, and community. After graduating from Cornell University, Trish rose to the ranks of Horticulture magazine to become that magazine's first female editor-in-chief and editorial director. From 2005 to 2008, she served as the Mass Horticultural Society's Director of Education and Outreach, where she assembled a team of talented educators that relaunched the Plantmobile and brought back the Society's youth and adult educational programming. She also directed the Master's Gardening Training Program. Since 2009, Trish has been the Assistant Director of Internal Operations at the Natick Community Organic Farm, where she serves on the farm's leadership team and is responsible for the farm's fundraising, marketing, event planning, and also assists with cut flower production and arranging. In August 2018, Trish was awarded a silver medal from the Massachusetts Horticultural Society for her contributions to horticultural education. A passionate cook and advocate for locally grown food, Trish gives workshops and lectures on horticultural and agricultural subjects, and she spends her free time researching the historic land use and ownership of the Natick Community Organic Farm. She lives and gardens in Waltham, Massachusetts with her husband and daughters. Let's give Trish a warm but silent Zoom applause. And Trish, I hand this over to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
So thank you very much for having me. As Mike said, I am the Assistant Director of Internal Operations in a nonprofit educational farm. You need someone who does not farm and who does not educate to help keep the place moving. That's essentially my role. And yes, my family will tell you that I spend an exorbitant amount of my limited free time diving into esoteric historical things related to the farm, and occasionally emerge from my office victorious, having found a deed or a picture or some other little bit that they very kindly humor me with, but people like you will probably enjoy. So I've been at the farm a long time. It depends on how you count, but I was an 11-year-old who went through our programming, and I left to go to college and study agriculture because of the farm in my life. And then I came back as a quote unquote adult in my current role about 12 years ago. So can speak very forcibly to the effect of a place like this in your community and on individual lives. So let's get going. So as Mike said in the introduction, we're a nonprofit certified organic farm. We provide the town of Natick and the surrounding community with productive open space, local food that we grow on property, and hands-on education. And we provide that hands-on learning opportunities for all ages, but our main audience, or our bread and butter audience, is youth who come through our programming for kids ages 3 to 17. Now we're going to dive into the history just a little bit. Like, I could do a whole talk on the history because in my 12 years as the farm's assistant director, I have basically researched the entire deed chain back to 1651 and know who owned the farm and what they grew there. Because as someone who currently works with people who work the land, I'm really interested in how people used this land before us, how it sustained people, how it's provided them with not only a daily meal, but additional income. And it's fascinating to me that you can use one piece of property, like our 27 acres, sort of look at a hundreds of years lens of history relating to agriculture and land use and thought about the environment. So that's one of the reasons why I began on this project. The other reason is that somebody asked me who built the barn and why. Well, that was a very long rabbit hole, but we'll get there. So we have 27 acres. The land is owned by the town of Natick, and we worked to get it into conservation in April of 2009. That passed. We know that this land has been feeding and sustaining people's lives since the founding of Natick in 1651, but we occasionally find evidence like the drill that you see on hopefully your left, which is a Native American made stone drill, would have had a wooden shaft on the top. We find bits and pieces like this occasionally in our fields, which is just a reminder that we are the current caretakers of a piece of land with a long history. So who farmed before us? You know, history tends to be written by the victors, as they say. We know Native Americans farmed this land. We know that they were here before the arrival of Europeans. We know that there was a cranberry bog on the land. We know that the front fields that we have are free of stones, which is a unique thing for New England farming. You know, what we always joke that New England farm's #1 crop is stones. So given those conditions, the richness of the soil, the closeness to the river, closeness to the walking paths that were along the river, and even the use of the river as for water transportation, it's highly likely that this was a farmed area. Native Americans in this area were seasonal. They moved from the coastland inland, depending on the time of year, to hunt, fish, plant, and gather. They practiced a form of agriculture called slash and burn, where they would free up a piece of land by girdling trees and burning out the undergrowth. Farming, you know, the traditional Three Sisters, squash, beans, and corn in that spot for 8 to 10 years. And then when the fertility had worn down a bit, they would move to a new spot. So they had great influence on the landscape that way. Clearing out the undergrowth made actually really nice area for game to live. So that improved their hunting grounds. And they tended to grow crops that they could plant and then leave to let Mother Nature tend. Where the written history comes in of this farm is when it became a plantation for Native Americans in 1651 under the Reverend John Eliot. The Native Americans in Natick owned the land in common. until the first division in 1719, I believe. And they farmed the land in an English system where all the houses were grouped together along a main road, like Elliott Street or Pleasant Street. And then they each had a chunk of woodland and meadow and a lot off of the main road. So it was a traditional English style of farming that they were adapting from the get-go. Natick Community Organic Farms turns out to be one of the ministerial lot for the Elliott Church. So the ministers of the church, the reverends of the church, had use of the land. So there were two Native American ministers who followed after John Eliot Stott's preaching. Actually, three. Daniel Takawambit, a name in the middle, and John Nesusiman of Sandwich. So we know that the land was used to sustain Native Americans through the founding of Natick. And also, you know, the reverends of the time would have probably grown food to feed themselves from it. Where we start to have more in-depth records of the land use is with the first European white male to be the minister and live in town, and that was the Reverend Oliver Peabody. He moved to Natick in 1721. He had just graduated from Harvard College. He was originally from Boxford, where his father was a selectman and ran a sawmill and a grist mill on the river there. And his father was on the hook for his son's collegiate tuition. Reverend Peabody had to go to work as part of his training for the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel in New England among the Indians in order to pay back his schooling. And so he was hired at 40 pounds a year and given a chunk of land. He was given the ministerial lot that had been occupied by the ministers before him, and he was also given an additional 60 acres on which to build his homestead. And he was given proprietary rights to that land. So that makes him one of the first European landowners in the town of Natick. He wrote to the Society of New England several times during the course of his lifetime, and those records are in Harvard's records, asking for more money and asking for more help. And he, in the first account that I found mentioning the fertility of the farm, he describes the land as being a meadow and an upland and it being wet and stony. He wasn't very high on it for its agricultural uses, but it did feed him. So I think for me, one of the more interesting characters in the story of the land's history is his wife, Hannah Baxter, who he married in 1723 or 1724. She was from Medfield. She was also the daughter of a minister. Together they had 12 children, which was not unusual for the time. They had 8 girls and 4 boys. But what is unusual is only 3 of those children married. And only 1 went on to have children of their own. 4, in fact, died in infancy. Hannah has a almost 72-year history with this piece of land. And to me, it's fascinating. So she first moved to Natick as a young bride. She would have had a house garden on the plot at which she raised food to feed her family. The Peabodys, like many people, had enslaved people working for them who also would have helped with the food production and the care of the land and the children. And she and her husband lived there until he died in 1752, at which point Hannah and her son William took over in 1753. But due to illness, Reverend Peabody's family was now 500 pounds in debt, which was a colossal amount of money for the time. So she ends up having to mortgage that 20-acre lot in 1759 to pay off some of those creditors. And then she ends up having to sell it outright to two businessmen from Boston to make the rest, and to marry off her youngest daughter, and to actually engage in another marriage herself, her second, his third, to Deacon John Elliott. But the news is good, is because they managed to rebuy the farm in 1770. And then she continues to live there with her daughter, Sarah, and Sarah's husband, Captain William Brown, until she is 92 years old in 1796. So what an amazing life she must have had on this piece of land, and figuring out how to use it to feed herself, her family, and having to mortgage it and having to get it back. It's kind of an incredible tale. One day I will find a picture of her, not just have the silhouette, but it hasn't happened yet. I could talk about the other 24 owners of the land in great detail, but I'm not going to. I'm going to skip around a little bit. I'm going to talk about some of the, I think, the better known names of the era, because I think they'll be of interest to the Natick Historic Society. So the Bacon family takes over the land in the 1800s. The first was John Bacon Sr., and then followed by his son, Pump John Bacon. He was called Pump John because he made wooden pumps that moved water. And there's some speculation that he built the barn that we had up until March of this year in 1815 as a workspace to make those pumps. In fact, if you look at the photo above the map, you can see that we have a man's footprint size, I believe we worked it out to be size 10, worn into the floorboards there, where somebody stood and did highly repetitive work in the same position for a very long time. The Bacons farmed the land as the Peabodys had, but this was a time where commercial agriculture and the renting out of plots of land to other tenants or sub-farmers was becoming more and more common, which is what they did. They had tenement farmers in many of their fields. They ended up owning and running a large conglomerate of land up and down Route 16 that ranged from where the current Natick Community Organic Farm is all the way up to Carver Hill. And the records in the inventory show the names of the people who were farming there. So Pump John built the barn using wood that, funnily enough, blew down in a Category 4 hurricane from Carver Hill, and it would have been drawn by oxen to his farm, our farm, Natick Community Organic Farm, and it would have been milled on stream at the sawmill that stood once on the stream. So the Bacons farmed the land for about 60 years or so. Ira Bacon is the bachelor son of Pump John Bacon, who, along with his bachelor brother Willard, lived next door to the farm and run it until Ira's death, at which point Leonard Morris of the hospital fame buys the land at auction. Oh, sorry, I just lost my place for a second. At the time when Ira passed and the land went to auction, the crops from the land that were being harvested were oak and walnut trees and corn. And the buildings are described as a barn and a corn barn. And in fact, I know that the Natick Historical Society has the Bacon corn lock to the corn barn in its collection. And one day I'm going to come down for a closer look. The 1900s is when we see the Honeywell family start to have great involvement in the farm. Arthur Honeywell's wife helped to purchase the farm for her nephew, William Patton, and then gave the farm to his unwed daughter, Jane Patton, in 1924, and who then passed it on to her adopted children, Elizabeth, whose married name was Flint, and Her other daughter, whose married name was Tuttle, and they had it through 1996. And at this time, again, we were talking about fields that were rented. They were, at this point, agriculture in the Natick area was a market garden economy. It was producing, like many of the towns surrounding Boston that were linked to Boston by a railroad, products that were highly perishable that could be traveled by rail or by road a short distance into town. So things like milk and apples and poultry were the main crops of the farm. The Flints held the farm until the 1970s, and then they sold it to a Wayland-based land developer named Einar Robson, who also raised horses. So if you like to go down rabbit holes, you can read about all the horses that he owned. And then the town of Natick came along and said to him, guess what, Mr. Robson? We'd really like to take some land by eminent domain so that we can put up a school. At the time, it was the early 70s. Natick's population was exploding. And they were really afraid that they were not going to have enough land or enough buildings to successfully hold and educate all of Natick students. So the school committee decided to go ahead and get the town to advocate to take this land by eminent domain. They allowed Mr. Robson to keep the lots along Route 16 as house lots and develop them and sell them off. But they held back on this parcel, the one parcel that we have today of the 27 acres. Now, at the same time, as the town was doing this, a little fledgling youth project called Red Wing Farm was being set up by members of the Elliott Church and working with the Natick Recreation Department as a way to gainfully occupy at-risk teenagers during a time of increased drug use and idleness, that when people didn't have things to do. It was the Back to the Land movement, and they said, why don't we get the kids together? We'll teach them how to farm. They'll learn how to get along as they do it. They can make some pocket money as they work and stay out of trouble. So our farm founder or co-founder, Mr. George Ames, was a very, very smart and wise Yankee. And after commuting down to Red Wing Farm, which was on the site of the the current day Audubon property, George could not help but notice what those front fields in that old Flint farm were stone free. And being a smart man, he said, well, why don't we go to the school committee and see if they'll let us farm there just until they figure out what they're going to do. So he sent the director of the Red Wing Farm project, Dr. Mark Winnie, who's since gone on to be a national expert and advocate for horticulture, but at the time was a young 20-something, to the school committee to request use of the land for the youth-oriented community farm, which they granted in September of 1975. I will also note, as an aside though, the barn was in rough shape at that time. You can see the center photo there of the red barn. Most people sometimes forget that the current entrance to the farm is actually the back door. And this is actually the view from the other side of the old barn, looking into it. But it was in rough shape. The families that had been owning the farm had been using it more as a place to exercise their horses, and they had rented out cornfields, but it hadn't really been in full production. And the roadway was very overgrown, and there was discussion of ripping down the barn in the school committee notes because nobody knew what to do with it. All right, so now we're getting a little bit more recent history. I'm the kid on the left in the Georgia Tech t-shirt, just evidence that I did grow up working at the farm. And my colleagues, Jean Heafy and Laura Plesa, are still in the area and occasionally come by for visits. But I'm going to talk to you a little bit now, switching gears, and tell you about how our work actually goes on a daily basis, how we apply our mission. I think some of this is just intuitive, but I think it's worth repeating. There is a vast difference between having open space in a community and having productive open space in a community. All right, open space serves a wonderful recreational purpose, an ecological purpose, a place to commune with nature, a way to sort of lessen urban pressure in our towns, keep our school populations lower, and add to the beauty of them. Productive open space does all of those things too, but it feeds people. And we are advocates for the productive open space of Natick. Only 2.86% of Natick land is still in agricultural use, and we have a chunk of it. And we have been a model since our beginning in 1975 for showing people how a small plot of land can be used to feed a community, even in a busy suburb like Natick. And it turns out to be an important source of local food that way. We produce products seasonally, things that we grow on the farm or produce on the farm from our plants and our animals. So that includes honey, cut flowers, woolen yarn from our sheep, and many, many types of vegetables. We produce food all year round. And I think sometimes people are surprised by this fact, but it has to do with the fact that we have season extenders in our land. We have hoop houses and greenhouses. And so with the help of those buildings that collect the sun and warm up soil, we're able to extend our traditional growing season into the shoulders of the New England growing year, which is May through October. And there's really only one bad month for growing crops here in New England, and that's December. And that's because our light levels are so low that sort of mesclun mixes and things that we grow in the greenhouses just don't thrive and tend to taste a little salty. As a diversified farm, though, we're growing more than just vegetables. Many of you know and that we make our own maple syrup using an old-timey process of drilling holes in the sugar maples all over Natick and 4 other towns, and hanging buckets and coming by with our kids to collect the sap and take the sap down to our wood-fired evaporator and to cook it off into syrup. We also raise humanely raised livestock, including Thanksgiving turkey. That's mine from last year in the bottom right corner. I know I'm a little biased, but I think that we have very tasty birds and that they are worth the price per pound that we charge for them. Here are some of the season extenders that I was talking about. This is, sorry, I'm pointing at my screen. In the top right corner is a hoop house. That is a type of greenhouse where you grow directly in the ground, and the sun's warmth is used to heat up the ground. And then in a greenhouse, you tend to grow in a raised bed, like in the lower left corner. One of the things that I think sometimes gets lost in our conversation of food is that fresh food is most at its most nutritious. Okay, something that's harvested and then trucked across the country or flown in from another country loses its nutritional value during transit. So the fresher your food is, the more nutrition it's going to hold. So if you're really interested in good health, you want to be looking for freshly picked foods, right? And that's one of the things that we teach to our farm. And what we do is we market the food we grow. Now, COVID has thrown us a curveball, just like every other organization and every other farm. But it's also opened some opportunities for us. This past year, we weren't able to open our youth run stand on Route 16 due to COVID, but we were able to run a senior CSA, which is a community supported agricultural share program, that brought subsidized delivered shares of vegetables to seniors across town for the entire growing season. So like most farms, what we do is when we have a product, we pivot to sell it when we can't use our traditional outputs. So in some ways, I think we were better equipped to deal with COVID and marketing food than other sorts of organizations. We also will go to farmers markets and just do CSAs off our own distribution off our own farm. And we also sell to the direct public from our On the Honor market stand, which is up the driveway at the farm. We still trust people to put their money in the box and pay for their crops. And the majority of people do. We are best known for the fact that we incorporate as many people into daily meaningful farm work as we can. It's a simple concept, but it's a powerful one. Because when your mind and your hands and your body and your brain are fully engaged in a task, you become intimately familiar with it. And it's one thing to learn about something in the abstract, quite another to do it. I can tell someone how to shovel hay or run a skill saw or carry a seedling tray. But if they do it themselves, they will learn so much more quickly and in such deeper level of how that work is done. At the farm, we count on people to help us do the real work that we need done. We don't make up tasks. Every day on the farm starts in the same way. We make a list of things that we need to accomplish, and we look at the help we have and we match people to it. There are jobs on a farm for every age, from small in stature to large in stature, from young age to older age. Everybody can be of use of a farm. And skilled farm educators, we use the medium of the farm to not only teach the skills that we need done to run the farm, but also to empower those people to do it. It's a unique relationship and one that can have profound effects on people. One of the things that we pride ourselves on is that our farm is open every day for you to come see what we're doing. There is no admission fee to come in, which is great. If your attention span or your young one's attention span is 15 minutes and you stay for 15 minutes, then wonderful. If it's 3 hours and 15 minutes, it's cost you the same thing. But we farm in the public eye because we want you to see how we are growing food locally, seasonally, and sustainably in harmony with the environment, and by incorporating people into the farm work so that what they do has meaning and then it empowers them as they go. For a lot of the young people who come to our farm to help out, they have not, in my experience, been engaged in meaningful work in their young lives yet. You know, they've played soccer, they've gone to CCD, they may have helped out at, you know, a neighborhood yard sale. But this is a chance working at our farm to be part of something that's quite a bit larger than anything they've had a role with before. And we are counting on them to do the work that we are asking them to help out with. And for many, many people, that sort of factor of knowing that your work is counting is a very powerful piece of the equation. And it turns out to have huge effects on people's identity, their feelings of self-worth, and just general confidence. One of the, you know, we teach people all the time about farming, but what we tend to also teach people about is life. You know, we're teaching young people how to be accountable for what they're doing, where teaching them how to be persistent in a task. We're teaching them about teamwork and how to work with other people, even when you don't like them or they don't like you, or you have a different skill set, or someone's 1.5 feet taller than you or larger than you. We're offering an environment where we expect you to make mistakes, but we also expect you to be persistent and figuring out how to fix what went wrong, and to own it, and to ask for help if you need it, and to solve your problems. And I'm very proud of the fact that the young people who go through our farm programs year after year, and the ones who go on to become farmers, or even to become doctors or lawyers or teachers, leave our farm with a very good work ethic and an understanding of what it takes to be part of a community and to make that community work well, which is for every single one of us to step up in a way that we can and be of use. It's a simple but profound concept. And we see this daily. It's just the joy that people have in discovering things for themselves. That baby goats have teeth, just like this little kid does in the bottom corner, or that turkeys do hatch from eggs like chicken, or like Farmer Joan here, how big the carrots got when she wasn't paying attention. That sort of ability to interact, to take part in something using all of your senses is just an incredible gift in an age where we do a lot of things on computers. And that's wonderful, but it's not always the same as interacting in person. And yes, we remind people where their food comes from. Now, we don't bludgeon people over the head with this, but we exist to show people that all food has to come from somewhere. And then if you are a meat eater and consume meat, that meat has to come from an animal. So we don't hide the fact that all the animals have a use on the farm. And for many of it, it's to be food for us. And people will come sometimes in October and they say, oh, those are good looking turkeys. What are you going to do with them? And we are very upfront with the fact that is your Thanksgiving dinner running around in the pasture. Now, people get a little taken aback by that sometimes. They don't always like to be confronted by the fact that to eat meat is to eat an animal, but that allows us to have the conversation that says, okay, are you a meat eater? Yes. Okay, so you're like 70% of America. Do you know where the meat you eat comes from? Do you know what sort of life that creature had? At our farm, where we follow organic standards, that creature gets to go outside every day, has fresh water every day, has the chance to move around, free movement, and is fed in an organic way and treated with great dignity, even in death. So we start to have conversations with people on whatever level they're at about where their food comes from. Some people leave our farm sad, saying, I'm never going to eat a chicken McNugget again because it comes from a chicken. But for other people, they are embarking on a journey now of really starting to question, where does the chicken that I eat at my dinner table come from? And that leads us to talk about the importance of supporting your local food economy and how putting money in a local farm like ours is putting money back in your community, because we turn around and spend it in our community too. So little lessons, little small details can lead to big life lessons at a place like us. As we spoke about, it's a great place to interact with the natural world and to engage in hands-on learning. I think many of you are familiar, so we'll move a little bit more quickly to this so I can stay true to the time. We offer on-farm programs for all ages: scouts, schools, community service, court referral, and for adults too. Don't mean to leave the adults out of this. One of our capstone projects is our Mentoring Teens Through Agriculture program This is a year-round apprenticeship program that allows teens who have been standouts in our other farm work to really take a deep dive into all aspects of running the farm. And we're really proud of the fact that this program, which is now in its 10th year, is turning out not only future farmers for our country, but future leaders in sustainable ag, ecology, small engine repair, and sheep shearing. The program is such a wonderful place for young people who have an aptitude for farming and a passion for it to really explore those interests. Not all of them are going to become professional farmers, but they're the knowledge that they bring to the world from that experience is profound and will help shape our food economy for years to come. I'm going to talk a little bit about our past year, some of which I think will be familiar as we wrap up. We're going to move through this part. There we go. This is a sad picture to show you all, but I think most of you know that we had a fire on St. Patrick's Day of this year. That was one of the worst days of my life. At 4:30 in the morning, my phone rang and our caretaker was saying, "Trish, the barn is on fire. How quickly can you get here?" And I rushed to the scene to find firemen from 4 surrounding towns, pouring water, not so much on our barn, which they had decided was a total loss, but on all our other buildings so that they didn't go up in flames. Now, sadly, we lost 15 pigs in this fire, 3 adult female pigs and 12 piglets. We also lost all of our grain, all of our hand tools, and half of our garden seedlings. There's no doubt it was a profound loss for the farm, but it could have been a lot worse. And we are so grateful to our caretakers who raised the alarm so quickly, the fire people who came and put the fire out, and the community who stepped up even before the sun was up, who showed up with new animal food for us, with food for our farmers, and who have stepped up to contribute to our rebuilding fund for the barn. And being farmers, while we did have a setback there with the fire that has hampered our year, we are resilient folk and we have turned and kept going. So one of the highlights is that we got this, thanks to our annual appeal, is we got this brand new John Deere tractor. It's a 4052 for those of you who speak tractorese. For me, it's a big, wonderful machine that makes my farmers smile and allows them to move large, heavy objects from place to place with great ease. That was the first drive of the new tractor, but it's also an important teaching tool. So when you're training future farmers, they've got to know how this big equipment works. And so for those of that are old enough and mature enough to operate heavy machinery, we teach them how to do it. And this particular scene, which I love, we have 2 apprentices working together. Pat, in the black shirt on the left, knows how to drive the tractor. Sarah, in the blue shirt on the tractor, is learning. And Pat's job in this case is to not only introduce Sarah to the tools, which would be, the levers and the buttons and the things in front of her, but also to help her with the confidence to use the tractor appropriately and to give her pointers. It's a really cool thing to watch peers coach peers at this age. It builds lifelong bonds that cement these people together for years after their time at the farm. And it is a powerful thing to watch in action. We weren't able to hold our traditional Maple Magic breakfast this year, at which we normally have a table from the Natick Historic Society in the lobby, but we did something a little different. We did Keep Calm and Boil On, where we encouraged people to come by and pick up their own pancake mix and take it home and make things. Isaac there on the bottom left figured out how to make pig-shaped pancakes, was very proud of his efforts. And we continue to do hands-on education. In fact, we did more of it in this past year during COVID than we've ever done before, in response to the fact that young people were spending so much time on screens and their moms and dads wanted them to be outside doing something physical. And so many things had been postponed. So we found that our visitation during this COVID period of time has gone up 25%, which has just been an incredible thing to see. Learning and discovery can continue even when somebody is wearing a mask. And I don't have the picture after this one, but this little boy reached in to kiss the frog after it, right through his mask, which I just thought was great. And of course, the cycle of life continues on a farm, whether you have a barn or not. And that's one of the things that I've taken comfort from in this past year, which is our farm is still to be able to deliver those wonderful moments of life and learning. You know, a mother goat having twins, a moment where a nasty tomato hormone gets attacked by a parasitic wasp that lays eggs all over it. And you find not one, but two of those in your field, and you can teach people about it. And this year in particular has been a year where people in our community have stepped up to help us. This troop of brownies from Wellesley raised $1,850 towards a new barn by making jars of mix your own brownie mix for us. It was the girls' idea themselves. The moms helped them can up the ingredients, and then they went door to door selling it. And then they came by one Friday to deliver not only the check, but a jar of mix for every single person on our staff, which this story just gives me goose pimples thinking about it, because we had so many youth in our community do things like this for us this year. It's just been an incredible thing to be on the receiving end of. And like most farmers facing a disaster, we did what we could to make things better. This is Mark O'Terry, a colleague of mine. We grew up together at the farm. Mark is now a professional timber framer in his own right and has gone all over the world building structures. This is him harvesting the original 1815 hinges during the demo day of the barn. He managed to find 7 of the 8 hinges, which we will incorporate into a new structure in the barn. Whoops. We turned the demolition of the barn into a learning opportunity. This is our Forest Gnomes program watching the dozers at work, and it allowed us to talk about what they were doing to make the site safer for everybody involved and for them to witness the work. And this is the site as it is when they were done with it, which is, you can look at it in 2 ways. You can see it as a sad thing that the barn is missing, or you can see it as an opportunity for something new to come. This is a sneak peek at what might be coming in 2022. But even as we wait to get to the place where we will have a new barn, and we will have a new barn at some point, we are making the most of the spaces that we have, because that's what farms and farmers do. We are resilient people who work the land. Sometimes we have fun while we're doing it, but there's always a place for community members to get involved in a farm like ours and to learn, to grow, and to build bonds, and to have some good old-fashioned farm fun.
Let me thank you, Trish. Before we move to the Q&A, your passion and your optimism are fantastic, and it comes right through. And if there's something about a farm that talks about continuity, what came before us and what will follow us, but it depends on those who are part of it now. And I was very moved by what you said there, and I think we all were. So we thank you so much for that.